Alright. Hello, you guys have made it. Last session of the day. I'll try to make it as worth your while as I can. Welcome to Building Blocks of Drupal 8. Blocks is in quotes because this is going to actually focus on actual blocks in Drupal 8, how they're different compared to 7, some of the nuances, some of the great new features, things like that. You're going to get the most out of this if you want to follow along. There's a Git repo that has all of the step-by-step code that I'm going to be showing you today. So if you're that kind of learner, go ahead. My name is ameeuwsen. I am a Drupal developer at Drupal Consulting with the handle ameeuwsen. You can find me on Twitter, GitHub. It's all under the same name. So as far as this session today, what you're going to learn is blocks in Drupal 8. The block system in Drupal 8 has been totally overhauled. It's completely different. It borrows some of the same structure from 7, however, it works entirely different and it's a lot more intuitive. So with that, the roadmap today, we're going to start with creating a block plugin in code. We're going to be adding custom configuration to a block plugin, one of the better features that comes with Drupal 8. We're also going to be placing, exporting, and importing a block plugin. So with that, we're going to jump right into it. So first, with the Drupal 8 block API, blocks are now entities, and anybody who knows what entities are in Drupal 8, or Drupal for that matter, anywhere, knows that this is a very, very awesome thing. Blocks in Drupal 7 kind of were their own one-off thing. You know, they never really belonged. You had hook block info and hook block view, and that was it. Anything you want to do as far as what the block was going to show, you had to pass off to a separate callback, and that was it. You also had multiple declarations of a block, even if they were almost exactly similar. An example of that was I was working on a site that had external calendar information that was coming in for events, and they wanted, a day view, a week view, a month view, a year view, and I had to make a separate block for every one of those, even though the URL was just changing one parameter. So it's kind of a nuisance. So because blocks are now entities in Drupal 8, they also follow the object-oriented way of doing things. Drupal 8 is all object-based programming. So, and blocks are no exception. So for everything you want to get, you have a method to do that. So have any of you had to dive through arrays in Drupal to get to a value that you want to do? If you have, it's a pain. It hurts. So in Drupal 8, there's a method. If you want a value for something for a block, you just say give value, and that's it. Blocks are also now reusable in Drupal 8. So the way you define blocks in Drupal 8 is different from 7 in the sense that you're not making one single block in code. You're basically making a scaffolding for a block. Think of it like a node. You don't define the content of a node in your code. That'd be silly. That goes against everything Drupal's meant to do. Blocks are now the same thing. Their content and everything about them is stored in the database, and what you're actually building is a scaffolding, and then you're instantiating that block to your site. We'll get more into it later so you can see it from an actual visual standpoint. And because blocks follow all the same entity structure as Drupal 8, they're now exportable through config, even custom ones. So if any of you were in this room previously for Ryan's presentation on config, you would see how easy it was to export something and then import it into another site or another instance of the same site, so on and so forth. Blocks are no exception. They follow the same principles. So we're going to get right into it. The first thing to know is when you want to build a block plugin, it's going to go in a module. That's just where they live. That's how you turn them on. That's where they're housed. So for this example, we're going to be creating the module MidCamp blocks, m_blocks for the machine name. In Drupal 7, when you made a module, it would go in the not so intuitive sites all modules folder. From there, most of the time you would have a contrib and a custom folder. In this case, ours would be custom. And then in there, you have your module name, in this case, m_blocks. Drupal 8's similar. It's a little different, but it's much better. You now just have a modules folder. So everything that you're not supposed to touch in core is now in a core folder. You don't have to worry about it. So in the root, you have a folder called modules. And then inside that, it just follows kind of the same structure. You have custom and then your module name. For all you visual people out there, this is kind of what the folder structure looks like. Module is going to be in the root of your project, and then in there you have custom, and then in there you have the name of your module. So the first thing when building any module that you need is an info file. This tells Drupal metadata and also other important things about your module that it needs. So in Drupal 8, you now have this YAML extension. In Drupal 7, if you ever built one, you know it's just .info. Drupal 8 uses all YAML files. So in this case, it's mblocks.info.yaml. And this, again, is going to go in the root of your module folder. And what that looks like is this. Pretty simple. This is YAML syntax. It's got pretty much the same stuff that you'd put in any .info file from Drupal 7. The first thing we have is the name. You can probably guess what that is. So in this case, MidCampBlock sample. This is required. You need to have it. If you don't, your site will error out and it won't work. Description. This is optional, but very. You should probably always put it because when you go to modules, when you want to enable something, this is the description that will show up. So it kind of gives some more metadata about your module and exactly what it's trying to do. Type. This is a new one for Drupal 8. It is required. Your site will error out if you don't have it. In this case, we're building a module. Next thing is package. That's optional, but you should probably use it because if you have a bunch of modules that are all kind of following the same, in this case, we're doing MidCamp. So if we have a bunch of MidCamp modules, there'll actually be a MidCamp separation on the side on your module enablement page. Wow, that's not a word. Your module enable page. Last one is core. This one's required. You need to have it. In this case, we're just saying this will work on any version of Drupal 8. So that's the info file. Pretty simple. So the next thing is our controller file. Now, everybody gets kind of scared when they hear the word controller if they're not, used to object-oriented programming. Fear not. It's very easy. So when you build a block plugin, inside your root folder, in this case m_blocks, there's a folder called source. So this, you need to have the same capitalization and spelling of this because Drupal is looking for that. The next two folders, plugin and block, you can name these what you want. However, everything in Drupal is done in this format for a block plugin at least. So I would just advise to follow the same thing as far as the name and the capitalization. That's just how they do it. So I would just follow that. Again, this is a visual, so it looks like a lot of folders. It looks convoluted, and why would you need this many folders? This is too much. But as you start extending and getting your modules to be larger and larger as you add code, you will start to see how this organizational structure actually does pay off, and it actually does make sense. So, step one. So in our controller file, this is what it looks like. So the first thing we have is the namespace. Think of this like the address of your house. This pretty much tells Drupal where your module, in this case, this controller, where this controller for this module lives. There's two benefits to this. One, it's an easy way. It's a PSR4 standard. It's how Drupal finds everything that it has to need to include for various things it's trying to do. The other nice part is because it's using this way of including files, it's easily extendable into other modules. So say we built some cool thing in MidCamp blocks that we want to use somewhere else. All we have to do is copy this next statement, which is use, and just say which controller we want to use. In this case, it would be MidCamp block and without the PHP extension. So the next thing we have is the use statement. We're going to skip that right now. We'll come back to it. The next one is annotations. So in Drupal 8, in order for your module to give metadata to Drupal to give information about itself, we do it in a block annotation. There's two reasons for that. One is performance. Drupal doesn't have to include your entire PHP class and every method along with it in order to know metadata about it. It simply reads it as plain text and finds this @block annotation and reads off that. The other one is all the metadata about your controller is in one file. So say you want to copy this and just make a controller that's kind of like it. You don't have to copy a bunch of different files and things from other places and copy multiple files, and no one likes doing that. So everything's in one file. It's nice and easy to find. So that's annotations. So as we scroll down, not too far. All right, so we have the beginning of our class. In this case, it's called MidCamp block. The important part here is your class name has to match your file name, aside from the PHP extension, of course. So that's just the way it works. It's how Drupal's expecting it to be, so just make sure it's the same name. So as you can see, we're extending block base. Now, what that means is, right here, we're saying we want to use Drupal core block base. The reason we're saying that is because we want all the goodness that comes from the Drupal block API. We don't want to have to rewrite any of it. That's dumb. We don't want to do that. So by extending this, we get everything that comes with blocks from Drupal. So 80% of our work is done for us. All you have to do is add in your custom sprinkling, and you're done. So the only function we have in here right now is the build function. That didn't scroll. There we go. So the only function we have in our controller right now is the build function. This comes from block base. All we're saying is we want to return a renderable array. Everything in Drupal is built off renderable arrays. And in this case, we're just using the key markup and putting a string in it. In this case, this is an example block. So if we jump over to our code, if you are following along, first thing we're doing is copying step 1, and we're just going to paste it and uncomment it in our controller. So this is all the code you just saw on the slide. Nothing is different, but it all works. So I just saved my file, and I'm going to go to my site. So the way we place blocks in Drupal 8 is pretty much identical to Drupal 7. You go to structure, block layout, and then from there you can just kind of place it in any region you want to put it in. In this case, I'm going to put mine in sidebar. So, one thing. You're going to have to enable your module. So I would do it through Drush, but I can't see it. So, I'll just go extend. Here's my example. I'm going to install it. I'm going to go back to blocks. So now if I search MidCamp, there's my example block. And this block is coming from this code. It didn't come with Drupal. We already created it with, not too many lines of code. It's very, very simple. So I want to place my block. And there's really nothing I really want to configure right now. Again, if you place blocks in Drupal 7, you're familiar with the configuration that comes with it. You can define if it's only available in certain content types, certain pages, if certain roles are able to see it, or if everybody is, and the region, which by default is already in there. So I'm going to save my block. Save blocks. I'm going to go back to my site, and there's my block. Real simple. It didn't take much code, and you've defined a block in code officially. Very easy. So we placed a block. It's all from custom code, but it really doesn't do much. You can do this in Drupal 7. It's not that hard. So what we're going to do is we're going to add something else to it. So in step 2, we're going to add a little more. So because blocks are now entities in Drupal 8, anything that's an entity in Drupal 8 can hook into the field API. So blocks are now fieldable. And for me, at least, that's a huge step in the right direction. Drupal 7, you can never do that. You had to offload it to some other, custom configuration form you built somewhere else that you had to teach people where it was, and it was in a different spot. It was very convoluted. It wasn't good. But not anymore. In Drupal 8, you can actually edit the form of your block configuration. We'll see that in a little bit. I'm going to go over what the code looks like first. We have the use statement. So because we want to use the form API, form is now an object in Drupal 8, so we want to include the class so we get all the goodness from form. We don't have to rewrite anything. We just extend it. So there's the use statement. And if we go down, we have this new one called block form. And this comes from the block API, the block class. So all you have to do is define it. There's 2 variables, form. If you've done anything in Drupal 7, you know about this. The difference is form state is now an object, which is why we had to include it up above. That is very good, because if anybody's ever defined forms in Drupal and you wanted to get the value out of it after a submit, it sucked. You had to dive through arrays, and they were, however deep, and it hurt. It was a pain. But now, if you want a certain value out of a form, there's a method for that. Get value, and you just pass it a key, and that's it. So this is the way that I usually do things, and this is the way that Drupal 8's also doing it. So it may look a little daunting at first, but I put a function in my block class. So if you look above, we're in the class, and I've wrote a function. All this function does is return an array. And in this case, all it's returning is the same structure that you would see for any form element you've ever defined in Drupal 7. It's the same in Drupal 8. And then all I'm doing down here is just saying, I'm calling the function and setting it equal to the form key that I have. So really all I'm doing is building a background color field and returning it in block form. So if we go to the code, in step 2, we copy all this. Place it here. So again, this is all the same code you just saw in the last slide. The only other thing we're missing now is the use statement, because we want to use form stuff. Whoops. Form state interface. There we go. Okay, so that's it. We didn't add very much, but it's actually going to make a big difference. So now if I go to edit my block, now I have this nifty little background field that wasn't there before out of the box. So no longer do you have to offload any configuration you want for a block into a separate configuration form or have it defined in code somewhere. You can just stick it right in the block. Any selection you make and save, it'll be part of that block in the database. So anywhere else you pull that block into somewhere else, all that configuration that you've defined that's custom comes right along with it. So as you can see, all I'm doing is using the radio button field type. I can select something, it works, great, cool. If I save my block, nothing happens. So anybody who's built forms knows that first you have to build a form, and then you have to build a submit function. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything. So if we go back to slides, step 3. So all that's changed in step 3. If we go down a little bit, now we have a block submit function. This again comes from the block class. We don't have to write the function. All we do is extend it by calling it by name. We're passing the same values as form. Again, just the form that we're building and then form state. In this case, it's going to be important for us because we want to actually get values out of this. So this line right here, when you define a block, you get when you extend the block class, you get all of the methods, all the variables, everything that comes with it when it calls construct. And one of those is this configuration value right here. So configuration is there for you to just throw anything you want into it. Think of it like just a dump all for anything you want to put in it that you want to make a part of that block. Drupal puts a few things in here. The label, some of the things you saw where you can define what pages it stays on, things like that. But you're totally allowed to just put things in here. In this case, we're going to put the value of the form element that we created. So we're calling this, since we're doing it in our class, anything you want to act on in your class, you just use this. And then we're saying configuration and giving it the key of BG color in this case. And we're setting it equal to the value of whatever was in that form. So as I said before, form state interface is now an object, and there's a method for it, get value, and you just pass it the key that you defined up here. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm going really fast. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to stop me. I know it's a lot, but so there's your submit. So now you're officially taking what's out of the form that's been submitted and you're putting it into your block. So if we go to step 3, copy this. I'm going to put it right maybe. We're going to put it right under block form. Again, you can put it wherever you want, but generally whenever you see it, it's block form, block submit. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to my site. I'm going to reload it because I want all that code. And now I'm going to make a selection, and I'm going to hit save. Now, before I hit save, I do have some custom CSS in here. That's not the way you should do it, so just don't pay attention to that. But we'll get to see it on the next page. And there's a blue background. So again, this was all coming from the block configuration page. It's all in one place. It's a beautiful thing. So if I go back, say I don't like blue, I can pick red. If I pick none, it'll be nothing. And there's that. So I'll go over how I did this. So in the bottom, if you remember before, we just had markup, but now we have this attributes key. So anytime you return a renderable array, wow, you get this attributes key, and attributes can include classes, IDs. You can put extra elements in anything you want. In this case, we're just using class, and all we're doing is taking the value that we set up here. Yeah, that one. So again, this configuration is actually part of the block. So when it builds the block, it goes and checks for BG color, because that's the key we gave it, and it says whatever this is, give me that value and make it a class. In this case, whenever I choose red or blue, all it does is return red or blue, and that automatically becomes a class. And then I just have some extra CSS in there to basically turn the background red or blue. That's a crash course. Any questions? I'm not done yet, but any questions so far? Yeah.
So, if I remember, Drupal 7 blocks out of the box like a body field.
Yeah.
You would have to do that, recreate that yourself, right?
Yes. Correct.
Are you thinking of a custom block or a block we define in the code? I think a body field is
Yeah. This is custom. So when I made it, I didn't declare any fields. So you're right. With Drupal 8, when you instantiate any kind of block in Drupal 8, that's just a general block. In Drupal core, that block plugin does come with a body field. Does that answer everybody's question?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, good catch. Anybody else? All right. So if we go back to presentation, exporting a block. So when you export a block, you get this. And what this is this is just a YAML dump of everything that builds your block and makes it a thing. So I don't have to go through everything, but you can kind of see, based on what you read, kind of what it means. So in this case, we have an ID of the block, the theme, dependencies. So we have to make sure our mblocks is enabled. We have to make sure that Bartik is enabled, which is the theme that it wants to go on, etc., etc. So if we go to the site, so under configuration, there's this configuration synchronization, it's a mouthful right there. So you get to this screen. What we want to do is we want to export.
Could you increase the font size?
Yeah, no problem. Oh, is that better? Okay. So we want to go to the export tab. If you were in here in the room before, you saw what full archive does. All it does is take every piece of site configuration about your site, put it in a tarball, and you can do with it what you want from there. In this case, we don't want everything, we just want a single item. And in our case, we're looking for a block. And if we go right here, so there's our block. And it's not just the one, of course. Any block you make is going to show up in the configuration option for you to select. And when you select it, you get this. And this is essentially what you saw on the slide. So that's exporting. You can take this YAML file. You can do with it whatever you want. There's multiple things you can do for configuration. You can put it in the config folder. You can go to another environment and just import it. However you want. Okay. So what you'll notice down here is Drupal gives you this file name right here. which is very important because the naming convention and configuration can be daunting at times. Even I don't fully understand it sometimes. So it's nice to get this because you want to use it in various places, such as we're going to do in a little bit. So what I want to do, there's two things you can do right here. You can copy this and go to another site, hit import. You'll have to save in a YAML file, but then you can just upload that and import it, which works. Yeah.
You would also have to install your module on the other side too, wouldn't you?
Well, the dependency makes sure it's installed. If it's not, it'll kind of yell at you.
Okay.
It won't do it for you, but it'll say
Oh,
you need to enable this module first. Same with the theme or any other dependencies that may be part of it. So we could do that, but we're going to do something a little more fancy. So we copied. Oops. So we copied that file. And you can do this in any module. You can do this with blocks, forms, anything you want. Anything that's exportable through configuration, you can do this with. And what we're going to do is in our root folder, if you create two folders, one called config, and then inside that, if you create a folder called install. Now, I don't remember the name. I might actually. So we're going to create a file. It's a block.block.midcamp. Sure. And we're going to paste all that configuration that we copied. Now, I'm going to, I can't see what I want. There would it be. So right now I'm just running a drush command to reinstall my site. Okay. So I'm going to tell you, while that's running, I'm going to go over something that's important. So the first thing you'll see up here is this UUID. Now, if you guys were if any of you were in the last session, you kind of heard Ryan go over how if you have a site that's not a clone of your original site that this configuration came from, Drupal will not let you import it. Some people don't like that. Some people think it's a good idea. I'll leave it to your own interpretation, but it won't let you do it. So say this MidCampBlock example is a gallery of some sort, and it's a gallery module that you as a site builder or you as a developer want to have, so you never have to write it again. If somebody says they want a gallery, okay, I'll just drop in the module that I had built and that I know works, and that saves me a ton of time. But the databases are going to be different because they're entirely different sites. They're going to be built at different times, so this won't work. So it seems like it's hacky, but it's not. Drupal 8 does this to build all the blocks out of the box from core. All it does is take this UUID right here and delete it. So that's what your file will look like. Again, it seems like blasphemy, but it's not. This is totally kosher. This is how it works. What this does is it turns this configuration file agnostic of whatever database it's going to go into. It no longer cares. Drupal is going to import it and assign it a UUID that matches the hash of the database it's going into. So that's just an important tidbit to remember. So if I go back to my site, remember I ran a drush command to reinstall my whole site. So you'll see I'm not logged in anymore. My block is not there. It's a completely new site. I'm going to have to log in. Actually, no, I'm not. So I'm going to enable my module. I'm just using drush here. Alright, so I've just enabled my module. My module is now enabled on my Drupal site. I haven't logged in, I haven't touched anything, and I haven't placed my block. However, because I put in my module, when I reload, it's going to show up all by itself. So because it was part of that configuration that we had, come on. So by putting it in config install, any configuration file that's in here, Drupal is automatically going to import that and do whatever it needs to do with that when you install your module. It's a very useful thing whenever you're building a new module, you get it on develop, everything's working great, you can export all the configuration, package it up, you can push it to your staging environment or production, whatever environment it may be. All you have to do is turn on the module and everything goes where it's supposed to go. So Drupal 7, this was pretty much never heard of. It was a pain to get anything like it, and it's really easy now. So, any questions? Yeah.
To make this work, would you have to know what theme was being used on the site you're installing it in? Because I noticed in the YAML file you were specifying Bartik.
Yeah. So whenever you export it, it will tell you by machine name whatever theme it's using. I can't think of any instances where you'd be using a totally different theme on another environment that's a clone of the site. That is a possibility. With that, you can take this. We got some extra time, so I'll go into. So in the site's default. So in site's default, I don't have it set up right now, but there will be a config folder. It'll have a big hash next to it to match it to the database. But essentially what that's for is you stick your entire site configuration in that config folder. That way, if you have your site under any kind of version control, which I highly recommend if you're not doing that, you can add all those files to your version control system, you can commit it, and you can push it to your next environment. Now, getting to what you're saying, say something's different. I know there was an example in here in the last session. Say nobody wants Devel on production. That's a security hole. You shouldn't do that. But on develop, you want it because it's very useful. But you don't want to have to turn it on and off every time. Inside the config folder that would be in here, you can have separate subfolders for other environments. So you can have a whole set of configuration for dev, a whole set of configuration for stage, prod 2, prod new-old, anything you want. So I don't know if that answers your question. I hope so. I think
by extension, if you remove the theme from the YAML file, would it let you enable it?
if you remove the theme from the file, yes. It would just install it on whatever. You would have to have the region there, otherwise it'll. I don't think it'll actually let you get through it. I think it'll actually say this region doesn't exist. I've done a little bit of testing of trying to break it, and I pretty much always ran into it won't let you enable the feature, or sorry, the module. And to that, if one, Drupal will install the configuration in the way that it's ordered, and in some, it's kind of a black box, but in some cases, when one configuration would error out because something wasn't there, it would stop the enabling of your entire module. So you'd have to go back and fix that one thing before you can actually install it. You can't get everything that you've built that does work and just have this one thing kind of floating out in the open. So that is one thing to consider when you are building configuration, is to make sure everything matches up. We went through all that. Yeah, that's what I got. Again, the sprint. There's my feedback. I love feedback. I haven't done this very many times, but I love doing it and I want to do it more. So if I went too fast, didn't explain something well enough, please tell me. If you don't want to go on here, come up to me afterwards. Totally fine. I'll answer more questions or take feedback, anything like that. Yeah, I hope you learned something.